committee, and this is my first appearance, so.
Well, welcome.
Sorry about that.
No, that's great.
I'm Carlo Wilcox. I'm Director on Angola Water District.
I'm Kathy Wood McLaughlin with TCM Consulting, and I've been participating on this committee for a while.
Stacey Wilkins, the assistant here at Tri-County.
And I'm Amir Hussein. I'm with Geosyntex Consultants. We are the hydrogeologic and engineering consultants for the Tri-County Water Authority. Can we go around the room, or at least for those that are on the call as well, if you can unmute yourself and please introduce yourself?
Gabe, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Gabriel Gaeta. I'm here on behalf of Dan Vink and 633 Solutions. We have some clients in the GSA that we're tracking some of the progress for.
Great, thank you.
Jesus?
This is Jesus Rodriguez. I work for GEFA Farm Management.
Hi, Jesus, thank you.
Alex?
Move on.
Yep. Nicole, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nicole. I work with the water operations team.
And Stacey Ann, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Stacey Ann Silva with Ultim Aqualogic. Nicole is on Molly and Maris's team over at John Hancock Manulife. So just wanted to add a little extra there.
Thank you, Stacey. That's everybody.
Is that everybody?
Yeah.
Great. All right. Welcome, everyone. Good to have a good group here today.
Sorry.
All right. Well, let's get started. Do you have anything you want to talk to the group?
No, we can just go through the,
We'll get
as much time as we can for the mitigation.
We'll get out of here quickly then. So quick updates on some Sigma updates for both the Tule subbasin and the Tulare Lake subbasin. As you all well know, the revised GSPs have been submitted. The elephant in the room, of course, is the Tulare Lake GSP. As many of you have probably know that the DWR has found the document to be inadequate based on a issue of the resolutions, and has officially began discussions with the State Water Board. So the Tulare Lake managers did have a call with both senior DWR staff, and then a second call follow on a week later or so with the State Water Board. Where they left it, and both agencies made it very clear, is that they are not taking any action until DWR completes their full review of the document. And then based on that, then the State Board may decide to move forward. They have a fair amount of discretion according to the board. The Tulare Lake managers continue to meet on a regular basis. In fact, they'll be meeting here in just a couple weeks. And they are, we're continuing to move forward with implementation and everything else as far as the GSP is concerned, annual reports, all of those types of things. So I just want to assure everybody on this call that if you're concerned about the Tulare Lake side, there is movement, there is actions continuing, and we are moving forward with all the GSP implementation, and the groups do continue to meet on a regular basis, the GSA managers, so there's continued cooperation. I'm going to see if anybody had any questions. If not, we will move over to the Basin Safe Affidavit of Non-Irrigation.
Great, thank you. Stacey, can you pull that up for everybody? So tomorrow's board meeting, the board of directors will consider approving this affidavit of non-irrigation. I've had a couple of landowners, contact me and say in this next water year, they intend to, fallow a couple parcels of orchards. And, but they didn't want to, go through the expense of pushing them out immediately. So I'm in an effort to identify those parcels and to, have something for our records that say that they are fallowed. We are going to, ask that landowner sign an affidavit of non-irrigation. Once that's signed, yearly, so because we do the allocations yearly, thought is, in January 1 of the next year, it would be reclassified as fallow, so it would not have any credits taken out of the system, and that's how we would manage that parcel. Does anybody have any questions on the affidavit, or?
So basically, the parcels that would be, that you use this for wouldn't be calculated as any evapotranspiration for that year?
Right, so if you sign this affidavit of non-irrigation, January 1 would be classified as fallow, and the way our calculations work in the Basin Safe Accounting Program is if it has a fallow classification, it has a 0 multiplier on it, so no credits would go out of the account that year. I think there's probably still a little work to be done as to if that is a permanent classification, or and we may need to put that somewhere on this affidavit, but if it's a permanent classification, or if they're just asking for a year or 2 years, or however long they want that classification for. So, but I don't think it's I don't want to speak on behalf of the board, but I don't think it's the board's intent to calculate or to debit people's account if they're truly not using groundwater. So we wanted to come up with an option to save those credits in their account.
Hello?
Any questions?
Oh, hey, Jim. I am on a Zoom call right now.
There you go. Okay, great. We can move on to Lower Deer Creek.
Ren's not on. Is he on? I don't see it. Okay.
No, and because I was on that team, there's nothing to report. We're
Okay.
still waiting to hear back from NRCS. They were finishing the NEPA part of it, so.
Great.
We'll let you know.
It'll be on hold for a while, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Not that I didn't work for the feds, but it's in the feds' hands.
Okay, item 3, and getting into the meat of the meeting here, the multi-purpose land repurposing grant. As you're well aware, the sub-basin has been awarded this grant. Pixley Irrigation is the lead on it, and there is a pretty good team that's working on putting together, the process for it. The very first step, of course, and where we're at right now, is we all need to get into an agreement and sign contracts with Pixley, and so that's what everybody's been kind of focused in on, some of the administrative issues and getting those taken care of.
So we received the agreement from Rin, actually, but I forwarded on to Jason Howard, Tri-County's attorney. He had some suggested changes. I received those back and sent them back to the group. So tomorrow, the board of directors will be considering the agreement in substantial form, but we will wait for final attorney revisions subject to that. So, but it's a general contract, and basically all we're talking about is there's one contract holder and we're subcontractors through the grant process. So the grant funding comes to the holder of the grant, which is Pixley, which is Lower Tule River actually, and then we supply our invoicing to them, and then out of that they pay our invoices as we move along. So The two main things for Tri-County are, the land repurposing, program that we'll be developing, as well as, there was some money specifically for the Allensworth community. In discussions with them, they'd really like to at least get drawings on the table for a second water tank for their community. Currently, they only have one, and it doesn't even meet their, standard needs. If they had a fire in their community, they couldn't put a fire out. That's how little water they have on hand currently. They do have money from the state to put a new tank. They're still working through that process with everything. We've been talking about this for a number of years now, and it still hasn't quite happened, but they would really like to have a second tank as well. And that tank, we would look at putting in the project area for our, flood control recharge project at Allensworth. So that's what we're looking at. I don't know how far that was $400,000. I'm not sure how far that will get. It'll probably be a planning process for that. It's not gonna purchase the whole tank, purchase everything that's necessary, but we'll work through the process.
Yeah, and we'll keep this group informed as we go through. This group is gonna have a lot of say in the, repurposing program. So as we start that, which will probably be much sooner than, Deanna and I were laughing earlier today that there's a lot going on between now and the end of the year, but as we start that process, we're gonna look for a lot of input from this group and the stakeholders, and there'll be a lot of outreach efforts as well, beyond just these meetings.
Yeah, on that tank,
Yes.
aren't they gonna put it close to where their existing one is?
I think the replacement, Carlo, is gonna be close.
Yes.
But I think this is a secondary source.
Oh, it's a replacement, not an additional?
No, I'm sorry, just to be clear, there's two tanks we're talking about.
Okay.
One's a replacement, that's a separate fund, and this one is the additional.
The additional would likely be with our project.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're also looking at wastewater treatment. So there's a lot of moving parts in the Allensworth area right now, and we're just trying to coordinate everything in the best way.
Yeah, because Fresno State is working on, with the state board and with somebody, that works with small communities on a whole separate, looking at consolidation, of utilities consolidation, which again is another separate and apart. Yeah, so there's a lot of things moving, and just to let you know, I sat in on the meeting, on whatever day it was, last Friday. It looks like the agreements are gonna be, signed by Pixley after their board meeting on December 8th.
Okay.
So we have a little bit of delay, a little more time to put together our scopes and things like that. And, as most of you know, I'm on the board of the Thule Trust. We interviewed some individuals, so we'll probably have a person on board after the first of the year that will be assisting everybody with the land repurposing. I spoke with one of my other, board members, Samantha Arthur, who's also with Audubon. She would like to work with Tri-County and suggested at one of the advisory meetings that she would come in person. She's also on the Water Commission. She would love to come and visit with this group, and also get TNC and start developing that relationship with them, since we're all working together and they're gonna work with us on the Allensworth. So that was a suggestion that she come in person to one of these, meetings here and start collaborating.
I think that would be great. I think as we develop this because they are partners in this effort, and whatever projects we end up, developing, having their input would be fantastic. So giving them having them here in the room for a few of those planning meetings will be important.
Kathy, when you said Water Commission.
Yes, she's on the Water Commission.
It's pretty well connected, Carl, as you can imagine. So it's good to have friends in high places sometimes.
And she and I talked for quite a bit yesterday as I was driving in the rain, being careful, and really start collaborating more with Tri-County. We were talking about how they got involved with Pixley and the Lower the Lower Deer Creek. So she said she would love to come meet this group, maybe bring somebody from, also with TNC. as we're going forward on the multi-benefit project together as a group, so.
Okay, great.
So, we've talked a lot about this grant, but there's, the anticipation is that we're gonna identify enough projects that there's gonna be additional funds, later, and I think that's really where we would love to have the type of collaboration with PNC and Audubon and other entities that, like Pixley has, so that when we do identify a particular project or something else through our land repurposing program, there is something that we can build there that's going to be a benefit both to not just the GSA, but to the community as a whole, to the county and everyone else.
Great partners, too.
Yeah. Okay. Quiet group today on the phone. Please feel free to unmute yourself and if you can, or, raise your hand and ask any questions. David, I see you've joined, and I know you're on mute, but I didn't give you a chance. Did you want to add anything very quickly? Is there any update that you wanted to add for this group?
No, not today. We do have an update that we'll be delivering tomorrow at the board meeting, but
Sure.
I wasn't planning on delivering an update today. I was just listening in.
Okay, great.
No problem.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the grant, round 2 grants. Let me go quickly through this. They're in the process of being prepared right now. They are due December. I wish they were due December.
Right.
November 30th. The Tulare Lake, Tri-County does not have a single individual project, but we are working on several items that affect the entire subbasin. For example, there's going to be a groundwater model update in Tulare Lake, and we're also going to use the money to pay for the GSP update that's going to happen in 2025. That's due in 2025. It's going to happen sooner, obviously. So there's some what we're calling an administrative task that Tri-County will benefit from.
Remember, you may want to back up and explain how these grant funds are going to be prioritized
Yeah.
for the group, because we may not see much funding come on this round. So.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, unlike round 1, for those of you that might not be familiar, the round 2 grants are competitive. It's roughly about $230 million from a whole bunch of different sources of money, which makes everything really interesting. Apparently, there is still about $55 million that they're still waiting for allocation. That's included in that 230 number. So if that doesn't come through, that 230 number is going to be reduced even more. And the key here, though, is that they are competitive. So each grant application, one grant application per subbasin will be scored. And they also made it very clear, DWR did, that if your project, if you received funds previously and your project scores the same as someone whose project did not receive funding previously, they will get the priority. So not only critically overdrafted basins, which we are, and the surrounding basins that surround us, but the medium and high priority basins are also eligible, and medium and high priority did not receive any funding, obviously, in round 1. So if their project for high priority basin scores, I'm going to make the number at 50 points, and your scores at 50 points, they're going to get the money first. So we don't know how much money is going to be eligible for critically overdrafted basins. We think, and every indication from DWR is that there will be some funds, but we don't know, and unlike round 1, we're not guaranteed any funding.
Yeah.
So what we are doing is we are moving forward. It is between $1 million, the grant can be, the application can be between $1 million and $20 million. Tulare Lake is currently submitting right around $9 million for projects. That includes the administrative projects and then some additional surface water recharge basins, as well as a metering program for some of the different GSAs, not outside of Tri-County. The Tule subbasin, we are in the process of submitting internal paperwork, which we are going to, I think, get together next week. Four Creeks is going to take all of the projects that are submitted. They're going to score them as a third party, and that's going to determine the ranking with the application. The ranking is important because if money does become available, it's most likely only going to go to the top few projects that you submit per subbasin. Again, I may be totally wrong, and they may give you $20 million, right? In which case, great, we're all happy, no one's complaining. But most likely, they would only fund a few of the top tier projects in each subbasin, is what we're realistically anticipating. So that ranking does become very important, and it's something that we'll know a lot more about towards the end of next week about how the subbasin is. And as you can imagine, all the GSAs obviously want to get their projects ranked as high as they can. We learned a lot from round one. What's important. We've had lots of discussions with the grant folks at TCWA. Just stepping back just for 1 second, too, I do want to assure everybody that the round one grants are also moving forward right now. Projects are in design, and they're moving forward, both in Tulare Lake as well as in the Tule subbasin. So there is progress. I'm personally aware of at least a few projects that are already have completed through the design process and had environmental clearances already, and so they're in one case the contractor's already moving out to the site. So the money from round one is being spent, and projects are underway. And for the Tule subbasin, as I mentioned, we are looking at potentially 2 projects that we would like to have evaluated for Tri-County. Those include some additional conveyance for our Allensworth project. So if you remember, the basin development occurred in round one, and now we're looking at moving water, around, and we're looking at some conveyance projects associated with that. And then the other one that has come up is in Angiola Water District. As you all know, with the well field, we're looking at, is there potential for some recharge there? And so Angiola would then utilize some of their surface water and bring in some of that in the flood years, and we look at doing some recharge and benefiting everyone through some work in that area. That project is a little bit more nebulous, and we're still going through and trying to decide exactly what both of those projects are going to look like before we submit next week to the group. So those are underway. I'm hoping that we'll come back in probably after the first of the year and be able to give you some good news on what's been actually funded. And as we get more information on other projects that are being built, we'll pass that along to you as well.
Now, you said that Five Creeks is the organization that does the scoring?
Four Creeks, yeah, Four Creeks, yeah.
Found another creek.
Yeah, so
Probably Dry Creek was the other.
Right.
Four Creeks is the engineering representatives for the entire subbasin. So for the Tule subbasin, David DeGroot and his team, they scored it last time, and they're gonna also be responsible for putting together the application as a whole, pulling all the different components together and submitting that.
A lot, they give you a short period of time, and it's a significant amount of work, really, but it's going to be ongoing, and the more we develop projects as we go along, and we just kind of keep them in the hopper, and every year, if there's a project, we just push it up and see if we can get funding for it. And in internally in this group, we may have some that go up and down the list as we develop, particularly, even in the land repurposing, we may identify different projects, and, as we move forward, we'll decide here at the advisory committee which those projects should be moved forward, and we'll move forward. I wish I had a longer list of projects right now. I don't. But, you know, we're open to development of those projects, so.
Yeah, anyone who has a project, I would encourage you to bring it forward. Okay. Look, if there aren't any other questions on that, like I said, quiet group today. Let's get into the heart of this meeting, which is the well mitigation program. So as we've been talking about in these meetings for the last couple months, the groundwater sustainability plan, when it was updated, the comments that we received from DWR on the 2020 plans, they made it pretty clear that their number one focus was on impacts, and these impacts from groundwater pumping, and they also made it pretty clear that they felt like when I say we, I mean the subbasin as a whole, and by the way, it wasn't just this subbasin, everybody in the critically overdrafted, for the most part, got these similar type of comments. But it was specifically addressed, what they didn't feel like we addressed adequately was impacts to domestic well users, and what and how many of them would be impacted from the water levels as we, work to achieve and implement SIGMA. So as we prepared as a subbasin, we prepared the updated 22 GSPs. The feeling was that, hey, we really need to have a well mitigation program for domestic well users, and not just from water levels, but from a subsidence issue as well. So that actually got written into the coordination agreement, an updated coordination agreement, and it's in the GSP, our 2022 GSP for Tri-County, in which we agreed to have a well mitigation program. The well mitigation program, it was decided at a subbasin level that we would have by December 31st a program in place for domestic well users. So, Dan and I got a chance to sit down. We started to put some bones on, on this working draft that we are sharing with you. This is, believe me, when I say working draft, it is a working draft. This is very much a work in progress. So let me take a few minutes. Stacey,
Which one do you want?
yeah, Stacey, do you mind if
You want the Thomas Harder one?
no.
You want that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me walk you through, perfect. Let me walk you through some of the thinking, and please, this is meant to be interactive for this discussion today. So anybody who has any questions, please, please pipe up. So the idea here was to start, like I said, start putting some ideas together on on the well mitigation plan, and start to identify some of the criteria and processes. Four Creeks and Tom Harder, again, they put together kind of a technical memo and a memo on behalf of the entire subbasin that said, hey, at a minimum, you need to cover these items. And some of these main headers that you see in this are taken right out of that document, so that ours is going to mirror theirs. In addition to that, they were nice enough to put together some of the attachments that we'll get into, which is the flow chart and the form itself. I didn't feel the need to reinvent the wheel, so we're going to pretty much take a lot of what they have and incorporate it into our plan, at least in terms of the forms. But I think what I'm looking for, and what we're hoping to talk to this group at today, is really some of the eligibility requirements that we've written into this document. And I think I think this is really gonna be key because that's gonna depend on how much this program ends up costing in the long run too, is who all is gonna be eligible. So this was written to apply only to domestic and municipal wells. This particular one, the one for ag wells is due by June of next year. So, you know, we had to start putting in some eligibility requirements. We basically said the 2015 date that you see in multiple places on this document is because SGMA started in January of 2015, and that's why we keep referencing 2015 in multiple places here. So for municipal wells, we basically said you have to be in regular production after 2015. And the reason I said that, and I didn't, you know, again, this is just the start of this program. We're going to have to probably define what we mean by some of these terms. Because the, you know, previous droughts, and this applies to domestic well users as well, if a well is installed and, you know, built in 1975, but it went dry in the 80s or 90s, I don't want to have to go back and worry about wells that have already been replaced or are no longer in use and are you know, may still exist but are not in active use. So we wanted to at least start to put some limits and some timeline on this. So if you have a municipal well that's in regular production after 2015, it wasn't just some well an old well that they kept around. And domestic well users, I put a cutoff from 2000. So if your well is more than 20 years old, I'm not, you know, lifespan of a well or domestic well, that felt like that was adequate, you know, plenty of time for you to, and if your well's gone dry and you've had to deepen it before 2015, that unfortunately is just, you know, what's been happening to water levels in this area, and that's one of the reasons that we have SGMA now. So, yeah.
It's just me. Do you have a technical basis with which you're using to determine the 20 years? I'm just thinking from the perspective of the kind of disadvantaged communities. I think that having something that backs up where you're getting the eligibility from would be helpful.
Yeah.
Age of well, like manufacturer specs or anything.
So I'm looking into that a little bit more, and I will try to work out and see if we can come up with something, you know, on yeah, like you said, the manufacturers, equipment, you know, for the well construction details, things of that nature. I will be honest, I did look at some of the information that's in the county records and in the Oscar database from DWR, and you can kind of see some spikes of when wells were built. So there's like, you know, you can almost see like where every drought occurred, and that, okay, a bunch of wells went in, and then they tapered off, and then, you know, there's another spike and things of that nature. But I will try to come up with a better justification other than, hey, 20 years sounds like good enough.
I think it's in everyone's best interest that the policy be defensible. And so that's just something that I thought about.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. And I'm, you know, some of the reasons I'm pointing out some of these dates in particular is because I want exactly that kind of feedback.
Yeah, and that number of all the numbers is not set in stone. I think that is subject to interpretation, and you know, we may go back another 25 years, or opposite, which I doubt. I don't think we would go any less than the 2000, but you know, it's still up for discussion. It's not set.
Yeah, nothing in this document is set. We are, you know, this is our, it's not even a first draft. It's you know, like I said, a working draft that we're sharing with everybody. You're getting to see how the sausage is made. Okay,
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Would the mitigation program be subject to some of the funding availability?
that's a great
That
question.
is a good question.
So we thought about that, we went back and forth and had some discussions, with DWR, and technically portions of this could be funded through a well mitigation program. We don't know how well that's gonna score, that's the only thing. So that's, Eric, that's really where,
I would think disadvantaged community would be like pretty high on the list on mitigating for municipality and even,
That's what we
Am I missing
want,
something?
we wanna utilize the safer funds, we want to tie into the programs that are already there. I think the problem we're gonna have is, once we exhaust that, and if none of those programs were able to work for a specific, claim, then, I'm not sure we're able to say, other programs didn't work, so therefore we're not going to accept your claim. I don't know the answer to that question. I wish I did, but, this is so new that there's technically not any funding for mitigation policies yet. So we really have to go out and try to connect to what's already there and, use the funding that's supposed to be there for communities and for the human right to water. But that is, it's not a clear connection yet, I think is what I'm trying to say.
yeah, the water authority has been paying somebody in Sacramento to lobby on our behalf for Sigma and that sort of thing. Is that in their wheelhouse?
Maybe not yet, but it should be. Because I don't know that does anybody have a mitigation program? I don't think these are the first Sigma domestic well mitigation. I mean, for us to have something up by December, we will be the very first in the Tule Subbasin to have anything like this. So we still have to make those connections. And really, it's something as a subbasin we should be pushing harder and gaining lobbying on.
I would think the folks in the commission would want to hear that we're in the lead on that, and that maybe we might be able to help, focus some of that funding in that direction.
Right, and it's a great idea.
Deanna, I would just add that Madera's been pretty far ahead on a well mitigation program for the past year as well.
yeah.
Okay, great. Stacy, do you know if they were able to secure any funding for their program?
I don't think they have, because they decided to fund it through landowner fees, so it would stand to reason that they wouldn't do both right now.
Okay.
So Eric, one of the challenges, I talked about, Sawyer Lake is kind of working together, and they all agree that, hey, these are, activities that benefit the entire subbasin, and we want those. So that's actually going to be ranked number one, on their project list. Tule tends to look at it as using grant funding more towards projects. Let's build basins, let's build conveyance, let's build this, and that these types of activities should then be funded at the local GSA level, within the GSA. So the Tule subbasin tends to be a little bit, the managers tend to look more at this grant funding as, hey, let's build physical infrastructure. So I don't know, Deanna's brought this up a couple times to the group to say, hey, can we fund, the GSP update? Can we fund, this activity? And for the most part, they haven't been that interested as submitting for something like this, for these particular grants. I'm not saying that there's not other monies out there.
Which surprised me, because technically Tri-County has some of the least commitment in this, that we don't have multiple domestic well owners within our area.
Our
And some
exposure
of-
is small.
Our exposure is small,
Right.
and some of the other GSAs have a lot more exposure than Tri-County does. So, sometimes I bring these things up, and it's, the table doesn't want to do it, but I would think it would be more helpful to the others. I can't get traction sometimes, and it is understandable, while the funding's there, if we can get some of the big physical projects, get more water into the ground when it's available, that's important too. So it just, you know, it's a half a dozen here and, you know, half a dozen there. There's only so much funding and, it's hard to, but particularly for well mitigation for domestic and municipal wells, some of that human right to water and that safer funding should be made available, I would think. And so we just have to do a better job of talking to those people and making that connection, so.
It sounds as though when or truly those groups already could approach projects that get more water.
Correct.
Over some of these others, which there's an expense there, but I think those are just.
And I know, like, working with the multi-benefit project, as well as working on Lower Deer Creek and some of the things with Pixley, they're going for other funding, working with Teviston and the Committee of Pixley, so they're looking at some other funding as well, which I think makes sense if we have some issues here.
Yep.
Yeah, the grant funding, I don't see us, or Tule Sub-Basin at least, committing to funding this type of project in this round two grant, but that doesn't mean that, you know, in fact, one of the big empty spots on my outline here is funding sources, and we have to start to identify between now and the end of the year how we're gonna truly fund this. And, how we fund it at the beginning may not be the same as how we have to fund an ongoing. I think Deanna said something important of, remember in our GSP, when we looked at the number of wells that could be impacted, there was only like 6 domestic wells that we thought would be impacted as long as water levels stayed at where we committed to in the plan. So we're not looking at it huge, but there are other GSAs that have over 150.
Yeah.
It's a heck of a lot more expensive than our plan, yeah. Okay. Like I said, this is good discussion. Please, everyone, if you have questions and concerns, please continue. This is really what I want to spend the vast majority of the rest of this meeting on, and then we'll just touch on a few other dates at the end here. But okay, so I think we talked about that. We defined, and we're only on the third bullet item. we defined the domestic wells to be 2 acre-feet or less per year. You know, the pump and the water needs to be used for household activities. We also said that the wells need to be located within the Tri-County area within the Tule Sub-Basin. So this is,
I was thinking about that. I'm not sure we have any domestic wells in the Tulare Lake Sub-Basin in Tri-County Water Authority.
Yeah, you're probably right.
You know, whether we said it was, this one is particular to the Tule because we're on a deadline to meet what we've agreed to in the coordination agreement, which is by the end of this year, we have something for domestic well owners. So Tulare Lake has a 2025 deadline, I believe, to put something together. So, but technically, I don't believe we have any domestic wells in Tulare Lake, in the Tulare Lake Sub-Basin, so that's not. So I don't believe we'll be getting a claim from Tulare Lake that says, hey, you have this mitigation program, why weren't we included? I think we'll be safe.
Yeah.
Well, and if we check and you're sure there are none, we can include it.
That's true. Oppositely, that is true.
That is also true. But
we sure though.
Yeah, we want to be sure
As soon as I say that, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to commit to that statement just this second. The other part of this bullet item, though, and this is an important one, is the sub-basin, the discussions with the sub-basin managers basically say that if a well is near the boundary and it is, you know, if they come back and they say to GSA X that, hey, my well is being impacted, that GSA can say that those impacts are due to pumping in the neighboring GSA. So there may be people outside of Tri-County that may come to us and say, hey, your pumping in Tri-County is affecting my well and therefore my GSA has told me to talk to you, and we may be responsible for that, based on the coordination agreement, as opposed to the GSA they're actually located in.
Can we get a technical, something, that would say, you know, a boundary of 2 miles from the boundary type of deal? Something that would make sense and is defensible, because I don't want to be held responsible for wells that are 25 miles into another GSA.
Yeah.
You know, and I fear that we may see some of those claims, honestly. So I think we need to decide how far we're going to consider boundary conditions for mitigation in another GSA.
So I specifically haven't written anything on that topic because I think it requires a little bit more discussion. But one of the things that Bob Anderson, I think most of you on this call know Bob. He's one of the hydrogeologists that works for us. He's obviously been here numerous times. Bob and I had a conversation where we talked about that, and we said, look, if that issue comes up, maybe we do a case-by-case, small, localized model for that effort and be able to show that, hey, is it our pumping or is it someone else's? We don't think that the big regional model that Tom did, which is great, you know, again, it's a big regional model. It looks at things happening on a macro scale. Is probably going to be adequate for it. You don't want to run in an individual well by well in Tom's model. I don't think that's going to be effective.
Well, the issue with that would be the assumptions that are in that model.
Right.
On water, imported water into certain areas that they have assumptions in there, but they may not be, I don't know how to explain that, but they've made assumptions as to imported water on historical data. And a lot of those areas are not seeing that imported water, particularly during this drought time. So when you run the model, I'm not sure it would give an accurate depiction of what's hydrogeologically happening under the ground at that particular time.
Yeah, my guess is everybody's gonna be trying to throw darts at that for quite some time.
Yeah. We weren't, you know, like, we were uncomfortable that they, the sub-basin decided to include that language in the coordination agreement. And we argued against that. Unfortunately, you know, the other members felt like it was something they wanted to include.
So from Bob's perspective, the C2V sim, is that what he would want to run that through?
No, I think we would run just a small, we'd look at the individual well.
Okay.
And like a 2-mile radius of all the other wells around it.
Okay.
And say, okay, what's actually really happening?
More like a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Not you know,
Not a model run.
yeah, not a full,
Okay.
you know, we're not doing $750,000.
Good to know. Yeah, every claim that comes in is gonna be 30,000 just to
Hey, you might
review
wanna
the
go
claim.
ahead and drill a well.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's just put it.
Just lower the pump, we'll be all right.
We're a group that's bandy about these concepts. I'm a little troubled with drawing a line around the outside of the area and then having to wrestle with bigger or smaller. I think we should make a policy that deal with the ones inside of our area. In this brings one outside of our area, let's deal with it and only it on a case-by-case basis. Otherwise, I mean, you know, it's like defense things, you know, how far out of your country do you go, you know, into like the Monroe Doctrine where you have to go Western Hemisphere. That's just my thoughts, but I don't like fuzzy boundaries, you know, and plus you're getting the fuzzy boundaries of gate.
Yeah, we don't want to give, we don't want to make it easy for another GSA to say, oh, go talk to Tri-County. They need to do their full investigation and then present that to us, and we'd look at it and say, okay, that seems reasonable, but, you know, the cost should be borne by the GSA that the well is located in, and they don't automatically just get to say, oh, that's Tri-County's fault. you're within 2 miles of Tri-County's problem, so, you know, let that GSA do the work, and then we'll review it and come back with a recommendation to the board and say, yeah. As you know, one of you said, at some point, it may be just be cheaper to say, okay, let's just deepen the well, you know,
Right.
drop the pump and
But even that, we should look at
Right.
each case.
Yeah, case by case.
Case by case.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I pointed out to one of the other GSA managers that they pump as much as we do, you know, in terms of groundwater pumping, so, and that's including with all of Angela's pumping and everybody else. People like to point at us and say, you know, you guys are pumping all this groundwater, but so is everybody else in the drought. There's no surface water, I mean, there's minimal surface water delivery, so.
And technically, it gets a little tricky because we're in 2 subbasins, but if you take the entirety of Tri-County Water Authority, we're pumping less than an acre foot for our area. When you add up all the area, because we have so much fallowed acreage within Tri-County, we're not planted wall to wall, which is a big difference from other GSAs. Other GSAs, I imagine, are way over that 1 foot per acre pumping. So, positive in our, plus, but it's still, you know, we still have areas that don't have access to surface water, and so there's all kinds of nuances within that statement, I should say, but,
Yeah.
but, you know, on the whole, if you look at it with the entirety of acres, you know, we're not any worse, let's say, than any of the other GSAs for certain, so.
Yeah.
We're worse off.
Let's see. So, last bullet item is the impact to the well must have occurred after January of 2015. So, as I said, Sigma started in 2015, so we're using that 2015 deadline. If your impact occurred after that, let's submit a claim and let's have a discussion. What I didn't do, and you know, again, we went back and forth on this a little bit, was we didn't put any kind of income limit. The SAFER funds, the state funds that Deanna was talking about earlier, they have a specific income limit for those use of those funds. They only apply to certain people. I didn't put an income limit. I'm open to it. You know, we're certainly, it's your document, you know, so if you guys feel that, you know, a domestic well user that you really, you know, someone mentioned disadvantaged communities, that there's only going to be, you know, there's going to be a limited amount of funding. If they should get priority, or if there's something like that that you think makes sense that should be part of this program, you know, please, you know, let us know. I'm pointing at Deanna and myself, and it'll get included in the document. But if you guys feel strongly that,
what would be the process, that one would have to go through to qualify somebody, and that, if you have that I don't know the answer to that real easily, and that's one of the reasons we didn't do it, but I would say that if we could put some language, if you qualify for SAFER funds, or not greater than, you know, I'm gonna make the number twice the limit in the SAFER fund, then maybe something like that, where we kind of, you know, put it back on the state. And I don't think we would use the same limit as the SAFER funds, but some multiplier on that. We don't want to be punitive. That's not intended to be punitive. It's more intended to be. Who's gonna administrate?
Right, who's checking the tax records?
The tax records, yeah.
It would, you know, ultimately it'd be the GSA. I mean, who else would, if we were administering the program?
Again, we were looking at 6, potentially, you know, 6 wells. Is it worth putting in that extra headache? It doesn't feel like it's necessary. But, you know, on the other hand, it's something that is certainly out there, and if you guys felt strongly about that, then, you know, we would include some. But if there's other eligibility, and income obviously is one, but if there's other eligibility requirements that you think need to be included, please, we're looking for your input.
And every different. I know there was concerns, in Tulare Lake particularly, where you have maybe ag wells, and it's the same owner as their domestic well, and you don't want, you know, somebody coming across their pump from across the property and go, oh, my domestic well is gone below its level now, and asking for those funds. But, you know, again, Tri-County we don't have, I don't think we're gonna run into that issue so much, so.
Right.
I mean, that was where other people were talking about some kind of income limits but also we handle that within you're not creating your own impact, or you're not contributing to the overdraft, I think is the language in here. And so that kind of, that sits in that area, so.
If I may, if the objective of creating a domestic well mitigation program is to get DWR's approval of the GSP and inclusive in that kind of overall review process, the limits that you add should have as low a threshold as possible. We'll put it there. So if you don't necessarily think you need an income limit, adding it in there would just be something that raises eyebrows and doesn't necessarily help you in kind of administering the program.
Agreed.
Yeah, good point.
It seems like a mitigation program is one thing, and when we cross the line to income considerations, if you will, it seems like we're moving in the direction of social safety net programs. And I personally think with those on a case by at the risk of taking too much time, I remember when it rained a lot here in Corcoran, there's a little area, you know where it is, Eric, by Paramount, Puzzle Shop, it's not in the community of Corcoran, and the street filled up with water. And the lady called here, called there, and called me, and I was as polite as I could be, but I told her, when you make those choices, you choose to live in an incorporated little area without all these services, then you don't have the services. It turned out I was able to get a steel levee, you know, an alfalfa levee cut in the water went away, so I was able to help her. But many people that have these wells are out where they don't have community that helps provide those.
Right.
And I don't think we should be very cautious to step in.
What about future wells? Like
That's
wells?
a good question.
Yes. I mean, you would think that you wouldn't want to open yourself up to people going, hey, I know what I can do.
Right.
I'll just go drill a crappy well. Right.
That's right. And, you know, we're trying to work with the counties on that. A few of us, in fact, I have a call this afternoon, with England from Tulare County. But, we have our managers meeting, and these are some things we're talking about. Problem is the permitting. The counties have the permitting process, and the counties are loath to not permit a domestic well. They want to permit them. We hope that we're gonna have some back and forth so that at minimum we can contact whoever's gonna drill that well and say, these are where, you know, the minimum thresholds are set. Please, you know, consider that when you're drilling the well. And a caveat that says, you know, I've explained this to you, and if you do that, you're likely not going to, you know, be included in our well mitigation program. So we're not really there yet, but that's the kind of thing we're talking about. But you're going to require
the counties to publicize the information, the requirements that the GSA has to fit in. Like if you don't do it this way, we're not obligated to help if you have a problem.
County has not been willing to do that.
Deanna, I think Lower Tule, if I recall, has in their mitigation program some language that says if you drill a well after the adoption of this program that's below the minimum threshold, or excuse me, above the minimum threshold, then you don't qualify for the program. It may be worth looking into adding some language along those lines.
Yeah, that I think that's exactly what needs to be added. Is that draft available, Stacey?
I believe they published it. If I find it, I will send it to you.
Great, thanks.
Stacey, again, did they have any other, eligibility issues in there that we should consider that you remember off the top of your head?
The only one I was thinking of off the top, Amaris, I think you guys have covered, is that they put in there specifically that if you have an interest in a property that took any transitional pumping, so any overdraft, you immediately are disqualified. But I think you cover that, but I think their language was just a bit more specific.
Yeah, I am not comfortable saying it's based on only transitional pumping. Groundwater pumping, period. If you're contributing to the overdraft or any impacts, your claim can be denied. Maybe we soften the language. It's actually under the claims process, which is there you go. On the screen right now, under filing a claim, the second paragraph there, it says that if the claimant is pumping groundwater that is contributing to overdraft or other impacts, the claim will be denied. And maybe we just need to soften that language just a little bit so that we can look at it on a case-by-case basis. So the rest of the document, they do talk about a provision for interim water supply. Listen, that there are domestic wells, and as you guys have all pointed out, we want to have a light touch. So if someone comes in, they really do have their well's gone dry. They need water. So again, thinking about this from a DWR standpoint, we want to be able to make sure that they have water until we can evaluate their well and try to figure out if it's something that is on us or if it's on them. But at least they have water in the interim.
That should be with partner agencies again, because self-help and some of these other partnering agencies have those provisions already. And so, that would be the first thing, is to partner with those who already provide those emergency drought services. So it's not necessarily that Tri-County, will be delivering tanks of water to the home, but we would certainly help facilitate that happening.
Yeah.
Assuming that at some point, once you get this to where you think you're pretty close, that prior to finalizing, you're going to test it somehow, like find a well somewhere, say, come up with your own imaginary claim and run it through that process and see what that takes, because to me, there's a lot of moving parts and administration required.
Yeah.
Even though there's only 6
Yeah.
wells,
Yeah.
you're still talking about a great deal of time and effort in each and every one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to do at least half of them
Yeah.
at some point.
Yeah, no,
That's a very good point.
That's a good point.
That's a very good point.
And, we probably should do some sort of test.
And it
Project.
doesn't sound like much fun, but that's the reason why.
That's right.
By testing, you think you could model it? It's just the line we model things very complicated. It just seems like finding a well that's not in distress. Testing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'd have to kind of maybe do a model.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be like a scenario, but I mean, I guess my point being is that if you had to go through each and every one of these steps for that, what does that require? Because then you'll be able to identify your cost, time and effort, and you might even have to hire like outside agency.
Right. So, this is the GSA staff. I mean, you're looking at the entire staff right here on either side of this table. So it's not like, they're not Lower Tule with, staff, I don't know what it is, 20 people or whatever it is.
Right. It's not gonna be, and those wells are not gonna be at the top of the list, so you're probably gonna be dealing with a case-by-case basis.
Right.
And when it happens, it's gonna be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's gonna go from nothing to big.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, if their water's, off,
Right.
we gotta scramble immediately and they may have already tried calling 13 different places before someone finally directs them to the GSA, so they're distressed as well.
Right. Yeah.
So you're right, Terry, that's a good point. I made a point, we're gonna have to do some kind of, and see if, see how well this whole system, you know, where's the cracks in our system. And,
Yeah.
Okay, good point.
Yeah, I don't know if it's on here, but I'm assuming we're gonna have a link on the website.
Yeah.
There would be, is that on here?
Well, it's not, because my outreach program is blank.
So, 'cause I think we committed to that by December, we would have, you know, end of December. By Jan 1, we're supposed to have a link on the website.
Yeah.
And it will also have just the general registration. If you're having domestic well within Tri-County Water Authority, you know, please register it with us and try to get as much information up front about that well and say, you know, that qualifies you for our, you know, something in there along the lines of, you know, in order to be qualified for the program, please register your domestic well. And although, I mean, it wouldn't be it's not a qualifier or a non-qualifier, but the more information we have up front, the better off we'll be in the long run, so.
We really want to get all the domestic wells registered, because we, you know, that 6 number that I keep throwing out, that's based on the Oscar database, and I don't know how good that database is.
Right.
And, you know, is it really 6? Is it 1? Is it 16? What are we talking here, right? So, you know, there's a big difference.
And
Yeah.
I saw, I think I saw Denise and Coyote on here too, and so this program would extend to the Allensworth municipal wells as well, so
Right.
we want to have, we already do have those, in our database, but, watching the water levels around those wells and tracking, that's very important.
Okay, so we're gonna run out of time here, but, the provisions for the interim water supply, I put a highlight there about reimburse Tri-County if the claim is denied. So let's say it turns out that someone's well failure occurred because the well's just old and it had holes in it or whatever, has nothing to do with water levels. You know, and we've provided them, I don't know, let's just say a month's worth of water. Do we try to get that, do we try to get our costs back? And it just, you know, using Stacey Ann's, comment from earlier, maybe a light touch is probably a good idea. But I'm gonna leave that up to this group, and if you guys feel that that's something we wanna include, you know, we certainly can.
I will say that language is in the Lower Tule and Pixley draft, which I still haven't found, Deanna, that if your claim is denied, you reimburse them, but I don't know that, as you point out, Amir, that it would necessarily go very well in DWR's eyes.
Yeah, right, so maybe our philosophy of light touch, because we have a limited number of wells that might potentially be impacted.
I would think you wanna heavily weight on what claim you're accepting and your process for verification, and less onerous on them to verify to you that the claim is valid.
And obvious frivolous, claims you would probably be able to identify right away.
Yeah.
So that light touch makes sense.
Again, you know, we're following the guidance from Four Creeks and Harder, but the evaluation of municipal water supply connections, if you are probably not so much in Tri-County, but in other parts of the county, if you are located near a municipal water supply, maybe a connection to that supply makes a lot more sense than drilling a new well. So I think we'll include language in there that, you know, we'll contact the local community, but I think, although I know in Allensworth, you know, there's some discussions about connecting them.
Well, you know, we have the area that we cover for the county that's very near Early Mart. I mean, it's just right across the 99.
Yeah.
But it's going to be very difficult. Early Mart has not shown any interest in a utility, putting, you know, allowing others into their utility, basically. But, you know, there is a regional push to do some of that. The state really wants to see consolidation, so, you know, what may not be reasonable today may be reasonable next year, I don't know.
Right.
And we'll continue to try to facilitate that, so.
Yeah, and does Early Mart have like a utility district that's water to the community?
Yes.
Very protective of
and just to be clear, it's not our intention that the GSA would pay for the connection, but, it's more to facilitate that so that the claimant and the, municipality can, or water district or whoever is providing that water, you know, they know who to contact and can help facilitate some of that. All right, access to the well for inspection, that's kind of self-explanatory. The preliminary well assessment, this isn't a complete list, but these are some of the things that we'd want to look at, and hope to get as much of that information. And I think attached to, the handout here was some of the forms that we've mentioned earlier from, that we, you know, we'd like the claimant to fill out. And then additional well inspection and data collection, it's blank right now, but we're gonna put in some, you know, some other thoughts into that, about anything else that we would wanna look at. Evaluation of claims, this is probably a section that I'm gonna beef up the most. This gets back into some of that localized modeling potentially and other things like that. The 45 days that you see there, that is what was in the Four Creeks document. I added the language, it says 45 days of receipt of claim and required supporting documentation. I realize that domestic well owners are going to have limited documentation, but we'd like to make sure that we have as much as we can. And maybe we change the word from required to requested, or maybe soften that, you know, language up a little bit. But we'd like to make sure we have a complete set of documentation, you know, before the 45-day clock starts ticking.
Well, Mayor, not to start wordsmithing, but you might just strike required.
Yeah.
It's sufficiently
Yeah.
tight and loose in the same.
Yeah, you're right. There you go. I always tell people that, you know, less is more in these documents, so.
In this case, it's just enough.
Yeah, just enough.
Yeah, you're right. So sometimes you tend to get cleverer than you need to be. There's some language then about, you know, some of the other problems that could be associated with wells, mechanical failures and holes in the casing, sand, blah, 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 that have nothing to do with water levels dropping and therefore, you know, are not the GSA's concern. Now, if water levels were dropping and then you have sand in your well, okay, that's, you know, that's our concern. But if your well is just old and needs to be replaced, then your well's old and needs to be replaced. Anyways, this section's gonna get beefed up quite a bit, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about how we're actually gonna do some of the analysis. And we'll come back to a recommendation to the board of directors. And then some potential options for mitigation, you know, we threw in a lot of different things in here, lowering pumps, connection to municipal water supply, equivalent water supply from an alternative source, deeper well, you know, some other type of acceptable mitigation for that problem. But most likely, you know, realistically, we're probably looking at having to deepen or abandon and drill a new well, or maybe we keep your old well as a monitoring, you know, well for the GSA. Something to that effect. You know, I don't want to have to drill more. I realize they might be dry, so maybe that's.
I was trying to think that through. Right?
Yeah, that might be limited, but you never know. It might, you know.
We monitor your dry well.
Yeah.
Do you mind?
If water levels, in the miracle happens and water levels come up, but you know, you know, something like that, we have to figure out: are we going to be responsible for having to abandon their well? There's a little extra cost then going through that as well. And then the final three things that have, you know, outreach program. We need to talk about exactly how we're going to reach out to all of the domestic well owners, how we're going to get their wells registered, how are we even going to inform them that this program exists so that, you know, they know that they can, and here's the forms for the claims, and you reach out to the GSA if you have a problem rather than
having to make 15 calls to the county and all those types of things. Making sure that the county knows that they can refer someone to us, and we can get them going on the claim, and we can help them getting water immediately if that's an issue. Also, tell us before there's a problem. If your well's registered, and we can start tracking it, then we know that, hey, there's 3 wells in this area that are all completed to this depth, and one of them is going to probably start having a problem if water trends continue year after year in this direction. So maybe we be a little bit more proactive too. So that helps. DWR actually said that several times to us, as being more proactive in making sure that problems are addressed.
What kind of outreach have you made to just in general to landowners? And the reason I ask that is because BLM, Bureau of Land Management, is getting phone calls from people who want to sell their property or donate their property because they're seeing their tax bills. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to do some outreach, kind of general outreach, so you aren't stimulating someone to say, oh, I'm going to file a claim because you're focusing on the mitigation, but just kind of a general mailing or some information about the GSP or the GSA, or just thinking out loud.
We've had a fair number of outreach to those who are taxed through, or who receive land fees through Tri-County of 5 acre and larger parcels, because we went through the Prop 218 and we've been going through this process for some time. Those who might be affected that have a 1 acre, a 2 acre, or smaller parcel, they have not had the amount of outreach. And, it's interesting. So, from my perspective, we're going to have to go back through and develop a list of property owners that are on these smaller parcels, and do another couple of mailings for one. Probably another outreach in the Allensworth community, which we usually send information on that out through their community services district, because they have their billing process and it goes to everybody there. So, and the school district. The one area that's a little bit interesting is the area covered by the county. I think we have a listing of those names from the county, from those ownerships, and we will send to them. But there's really not a community to go to have an outreach for that area, and that area really is kind of not interested in having people come into the area, so.
There's one in particular that I went to visit last year, and, they were pretty paranoid when I showed up with somebody that was in a uniform. The person who wrote our original GSP, D. Jasper, I'm sure some of you will remember, tried to go into that area just on an information gathering exercise, and he got pretty well ran out. So, it's kind of difficult sometimes. But again, we'll try to get the names, and at least send a mailer in English and Spanish saying, here's the link. Please register if you have a domestic well on our website, and there's some development to be done there too through Four Creeks, because that link will probably have to be in English and Spanish, and we'll get that done. So
At the risk maybe of even trying to be a little humorous, we're in this intense political season, and I've actually helped with a couple of campaigns. There are ways, because I get not less than half a dozen mailings.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's right.
Maybe we could just get a hold of the guys who are running for office. I'm kidding, but no, there are ways to get to all of the people.
Just get a hold of their fundraising committee, because God knows that the minute you give a penny to anybody, you will end up on every mailing list.
We're in the season, and what can they send?
how do they get all the phone numbers? I'll just text everybody.
As someone who worked for an assembly member in college, there is a database that you get access to as a member of Congress, or, the House of Representatives, or any state office, that you have to also give access to candidates. And Amir's right. Anytime you do anything that's even remotely political, they capture the information and it goes into that one database.
definitely captured me in
Yeah,
this
it captured me
season.
too.
Oh my gosh.
When we ask people to register their wells, I imagine some people are gonna go like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
many,
True,
yeah,
yeah,
many.
true.
Yeah.
So I understated
And
it
that's
myself.
okay too, I mean, it's
Yeah.
certainly not a forced, you know, this isn't a forced program, so.
No.
Right.
But, we just have to make it available.
We have to try.
We have
Yeah.
to try, that's right, we have to do our part, make it available, do our part, make the information available, as easy to access as possible, and that's what we're gonna do.
This gets back, Eric, to your point earlier about the trial run. I mean, the outreach program, in a sense, is gonna be a fair amount of work. And you know, this is a small organization, so it, you know, it already starts to stress the system right there.
Mm.
All right, so schedule, you know, we said that these plans, for the GSP need to be completed by December 31st, so we're looking to have this plan start and be active as of January 1 of 23, and we all understand that funding may be limited at the beginning, but we're gonna have to kind of take it on a case-by-case basis. And then the very last thing, of course, is we have to identify funding sources, and Deanna and I are gonna have to work on that a little bit. It's probably, you know, we're gonna have, realistically, it's gonna be the GSA initially, and then we'll look for, other funding sources, grants and other things, drought money and other things as they become available. But safer funds, other things that we know about for sure, we're definitely gonna reference, being able to utilize some of those and see if someone might qualify for those as well. All right, 5 minutes to spare.
Perfect.
Perfect. So please, if you have questions, comments, you want to see something specifically added, or taken out of this document, please contact Deanna, or myself, and I'm happy, you know, Deanna will, be happy to take your, information and figure out, but we are really looking for input. We're gonna continue working on this draft, so, the sooner you get us comments and suggestions and recommendations, and we'll try our best to see if we can incorporate them. Our plan is, we have another advisory committee meeting on December 7th. That's our last one before the 31st deadline for this document. So what we'd like to do is, by the 7th, is bring you a complete draft of this document. But please don't wait till the draft. If you have suggestions or comments, get them in now, so that we can incorporate them into the draft. Even if it's, you know, like I was, you know, as I said with Stacey Ann, that if you just feel like the whole thing as a general, the lighter touch, if you agree with that, you know, just let Deanna know. And if you don't, if you feel like we should be a little bit, you know, more strict, because, you know, this is money that's going to come out of the GSA, that we could be using for projects or other things, right? Say that as well, and say, look, I'd like it to be more strict. But, you know, this is a stakeholder-driven process, because we really do want your input, and you know, it is going to cost the GSA some money.
And the program will be officially, considered by the board at the January meeting, which is in the first week of January. So, we did not have enough time to have it prepared in a way where the board could consider it at tomorrow's meeting. So, even though it's a couple days after the 31st, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, we'll be okay.
And, you know, and we'll probably have the link created by the, you know, end of December. The link should be up, but the board will officially adopt the claim process at least. And we may go through some revisions of that process. It'll just be more formal at that point. Any revisions to the process will come back before the board. We'll move the project along, so.
Yeah. Okay, upcoming meetings. So we have a board meeting tomorrow. So all of you from 1 to 3, here, in Corcoran. Also, there's a Zoom link. Stacy knows that everybody knows that Stacy keeps a calendar up to date. So go on the website, you can get the link and the agenda. And then the advisory committee meeting, our next meeting will be December 7th after the Thanksgiving holiday here. All right.
Back 1 week.
Yeah, push it back a week, which I'm sure you all appreciate. I do. Any questions, comments, anything?
I think that's it.
Anybody online have any questions?
Well done.
All right, thank you. In that case, I'm going to give you back 3 minutes of your day. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on December 7th.
Thank you.